Welcome to the Neural Talks, your gateway to the forefront of AI innovation. I'm your host, Ranjith Melarkode, and together we'll explore the AI revolution with the brightest minds pushing boundaries and shaping the future. Through candid conversations, they share hard-won insights as we unlock the transformative power of AI. Get informed, get inspired. This is the future, and you're in the front row. Hi, Ramsu. Welcome to the Neural Talks. Thrilled to have you here.
Hi, Ranjit. Very happy to be here.
Super. So, Ramsu, for the benefit of our audience, would love an intro to you and how you put AI to work and how it's relevant to you, please.
I've been a data scientist for about 21 odd years now, and I've spent my time working on problems and detecting patterns in data across a variety of industry verticals, starting from the financial services to healthcare to retail to all kinds of industrial businesses. These days, I head product R&D for a company called Solus.ai, where I work largely on personalization solutions, which means I work on what would now be called very traditional or classical ML, like recommender systems and predictive models and clustering and so on and so forth. So when you look at what you call the AI revolution now, I would probably appear much like Jon Snow in Game of Thrones, because either I'm going around and everybody is looking at me saying, you know nothing, or I'm going around and saying, winter is coming.
That's a very interesting reference. It's the first reference to Game of Thrones on this podcast. But coming to our first question for you. Huge amount of buzz on Gen AI. Almost everybody is using it. At least everybody in our world is using it. Would love to get your perspective on Gen AI versus AI. How should people in business think about it? Practitioners in tech, product, engineering. Would love to have your perspective.
From a taxonomy standpoint, if you will, AI is a very large field that covers a multitude of problems. At some level, it was started off as, listen, can I figure out a way to replicate the various aspects that you would consider as being human inside a machine? And there were fields of endeavor that had to do with understanding the things that we perceive through our senses. And there were fields of endeavor that had to do with manipulating things as well. If you take language, for instance, understanding language would be the domain of what used to be natural language processing, natural language understanding. The expression, which is being able to generate human-like speech, is what we seem to have kind of now cracked at a level that feels uncannily human-like. It's not like you can do generation without understanding, so it's a part of it. And broadly speaking, when you look at AI, it's a very large field that covers a whole bunch of problems, including natural language processing and computer vision and so on, within which a subset would be machine learning, which is the field that involves learning from data and figuring out patterns in data, within which you've got neural networks and so on, within which you've got deep learning, within which you've got the algorithms that now constitute the algorithms and models that go into Gen AI. So it's many levels down, but it's part of the much larger field. It's just that now this has become so much newsworthy that this is what most people concentrate on. And because you have a preponderance of data and availability of compute, at least to very large enterprises, it becomes possible to solve a lot of these problems from a data-centric perspective. To say, rather than understand, for instance, the structure of languages or the structure of images in a very explicit, very deep domain-driven manner, what if I understood it simply by saying, I'm going to throw a mass of data at it and say, whatever patterns are in there, I'll learn. So we're solving a lot of problems that were in the larger AI space using simply a very large amount of data and algorithms that can use that using very large computers. And so it seems to have sort of done this little bit of a land grab.
Super. Thanks. I mean, so you've broken it out very, lucidly for us. AI is a superset. Gen AI is a subset, and then there's a large funnel and a technology set of funnel as well as a usage funnel through which it's gone through. So you touched on something very interesting. I'm going to turn that into a question. Understanding human language. Gen AI versus AI. What does it better? Are they the same? Does anything work better in terms of application? Would love your perspective again.
The dichotomy between Gen AI and AI in this case probably translates to something more like, do you want to use large language models that have already been built and simply solve your problem using a set of reasonably well chosen prompts and API calls? Or do you essentially build something that is very specific to your purpose using the more traditional natural language processing libraries and tools that are available to you? Now, the kinds of problems you would typically solve are either retrieval problems, where you're saying, I have a piece of text, I want to see what is the best matching answer or the best matching piece of text that I want to find within a corpus, okay, which is your retrieval problem. Or you have a unstructured data to structured data translation problem, which for instance is something like, listen, I have a mass of customer complaints and I want to translate this into a database that I can then feed into a business intelligence solution or a predictive model solution, something of that nature, where you want to take unstructured data, which is free text, and then convert it to structured. Okay. Now, in both cases, and a little more in the latter case where you're converting unstructured to structured data, as long as the text that you're dealing with is not very domain specific and does not have a lot of jargon and abbreviations and so on and so forth, to the extent of my experience, and I will be the first to admit that this is somewhat limited, large language models do about as well as the purpose driven models, sometimes even better. You have a set of questions to answer around privacy, around cost. For instance, if you're making an API call to something on the cloud, then you have privacy questions to answer. If you say, I'm going to import one of the freely available models and host it privately and then solve it, then you have a question of whether or not the unit economics of hosting something of that size and doing your own private inferencing works out, given the size of your problems and the size of the benefit that you hope to derive. So you have that kind of question, but that you will probably have anyway whenever you use any kind of technology. When your problem is not one of a more general domain and your text is very specialized and it's very domain heavy, very jargon heavy, then it makes sense to ask yourself, should I build something very specific to my domain or my problem? At which point your question is, should I build something very large, very general that will solve for a variety of problems? And do I have the data and the compute and the ability to handle the care and feeding of something that large? Or should I use some very purpose-built model that solves a specific problem for my business purposes and then move on with that? That's really the question you have to ask yourself. And the answer lies in whether or not you're solving a general problem or a specific problem and whether or not the unit economics work out. I think from a decision maker standpoint, this is the way to think about it. Okay. Any technology you have to solve for cost benefit. Your benefit here is that when it comes to general purpose, you'll do it reasonably well. When it comes to something specific, you'll have to spend the additional time and effort to train something. And the costs will be alike to that. So that's really where I think the trade-offs lie.
Super. Ramsu, that was very insightful. Thank you for your deep practitioner's view of Gen AI versus AI. Look forward to having you here for more podcasts.
Sure. Thanks, Ranjith.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Neural Talks. Hit subscribe or follow us on LinkedIn to stay informed of many more great episodes on AI coming up. We're the Neural, where humans meet AI.